Hello, everybody, and welcome to the From Poverty to Progress channel, the channel that's devoted to promoting an awareness and understanding of progress. My name is Michael Bagoon, and I am the author of the From Poverty to Progress book series. The first book in the series is called From Poverty to Progress. The second book, which will be coming out later in 2023, is called Promoting Progress. This is the very first episode of this channel, and I'm really excited. I'm going to do an overview of the basic concept that I'm going to be covering in this channel so you can decide whether or not you're interested in subscribing. But first, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a former professor in political science and public policy. I worked for 20 years in the digital technology industry, and I spent a lifetime of reading about history. If you stay tuned until the end of this video, there'll be a free book giveaway. So what's this channel about? Well, I will explore a wide variety of topics that are related to the topics that I explore in my book, including human material progress, history, politics, public policy, technological innovation, economic growth, geography, energy, culture, and, well, pretty much whatever I feel like talking about. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about what I call the progress-based perspective, which is really a concept that unites the entire book series as well as this channel. The progress-based perspective is based on promoting an awareness of human material progress, and that studying history to learn what has worked in the past will help us to make the future better. We need to do more of what worked, do less of what did not work, and above all, stay focused on results. The progress-based perspective is both pragmatic and radical. It is pragmatic because it's focused not on what should work or what we want or what's popular. It focuses on actual results. And it's radical because it gets really to the core of what are the causes of human progress. It's very different from the ideologies of the left, the ideologies of the right, any philosophies or economic theory that have been in the past. I think you will find that the progress-based perspective is a refreshing new look at human society. But first of all, what is progress? The definition that I use in my book series is the sustained improvement in the material standard of living of a large group of people over a long period of time. And you can see this in many different metrics. In my book series, I use about 24 metrics where I show that for nations all across the world, with a few exceptions, there are clear improvements on almost all of these metrics. The main topics of my first book, From Poverty to Progress, Understanding Humanity's Greatest Achievements, are why progress matters to you, how humanity moved from a state of a level of poverty really that we can't imagine today to a type of progress that we take for granted. I will explore when and where this progress started, the causes of the progress, how that progress works, and how progress spread across the globe. This book has gotten a significant amount of praise from very noted thinkers such as Steven Pinker and Tyler Cowen. It also has a great deal of support from authors of books of similar topics such as Johan Norberg, Joel Mokyr, and many others. The next book in my series, Promoting Progress, A Radical New Agenda to Create Abundance for All, will be coming out later in 2023. And the third book in this series, Upward Mobility, A Radical New Agenda for Uplifting the Working Class and the Poor, will be coming out in 2024. So let me go over the perspectives, what this progress-based perspective is. Now, I'm just going to hit each one from a very high level. I'm not going to show a lot of evidence for each. I'm going to unpack each one of these concepts in future videos. First of all, humanity is better off now materially than it has ever been. And this is something we take for granted. We get so focused on the problems of today that we lose perspective of how far we've come as a species. The progress that humanity has experienced, particularly over the last 30 years, is the single most important fact of our time. Despite the fact, we continually ignore it. It's never covered in the news. Why? Because the news focuses on what happened today, not long-term trends which really impact humanity. So look, for example, here at the world income distribution over the last about 200 years. You can see that in 1830, about 87.9% of people lived in what's called absolute poverty. Now, what's absolute poverty? Well, it's an income level equivalent to $693 per year, or less than $2 per day. And yes, all of these numbers are indexed for inflation. So imagine for a second trying to live on $2 per day. Well, our ancestors didn't have to imagine it. They lived it every day. And what you can see clearly here is you see two trends. One is their dramatic dropping in the level of absolute poverty down to today. It's around 10%. And this is all the way across the globe. This is an incredibly important trend, and yet very few people know about it. This progress is widespread across the globe and in many different domains. I go into much more detail in my first book, but here's one example of the Human Development Index. This is an index that was created by the United Nations, and it's essentially a basket of many different indexes lumped together into one number that covers standard of living and education and things like that. And each one of these squiggly lines is one nation, and we're charting the amount of human development from 1990 to the present day. And what you can see very clearly is there's an upward trend for virtually every single nation. In fact, there's really only one exception, and that is Syria. There's that orange line there that suddenly drops around 2012. Why? Because of their civil war. Now, civil wars have been very common in the past, but fortunately, they're far less common than they are today. So, with the exception of Syria, there has been a very substantial increase in the Human Development Index across the entire world. Yes, even the poorest countries. And you can see here, I'll just show just a few metrics. Per capita GDP among the most populous 12 nations who aren't wealthy. And you can see there was pretty much a flat line up until the last few decades. And then suddenly you see an upturn, particularly after 1990. And this was not in every country, but in the vast majority of populous countries throughout the world. You can also see the trend in life expectancy at birth for the 20 poorest nations, and the literacy rate for young women in the 12 most populous nations. So you see these trends not just in the wealthy West, but across the entire world. Acknowledging the existence of progress is not optimism about the future. It is an empirical observation about the material conditions of today compared to the material conditions of the past. Progress in the past does not guarantee future progress. Now, I don't believe I can predict the future. I'm not really worried about predicting the future. What I'm interested in is understanding the long-term trends of how today is compared to how things were in the past. And there's a very clear and positive trend. Now, I don't know what's going to happen in the future. Maybe those trends will suddenly change. But, for example, if you were living 20 years ago, you might think the same. But those trends continued in a positive direction despite all the problems that we had 20 years ago. Progress at some time is guaranteed to end. Humanity will go extinct. I know that's not something we like to think about that much, but at some point in time, the sun will go out, and probably we won't have any place habitable to live. We may kill ourselves in a nuclear war. We may get hit by a gamma ray burst or an asteroid impact. We may get invaded by little green men. But I don't think these things are going to happen anytime soon. There's a possibility. I certainly don't think it's going to happen tomorrow. It probably won't happen within the lifetime of anyone today. But if you look towards the distant future, it's quite likely that something like this will happen. So I don't believe that progress is guaranteed to keep going. I think it's guaranteed to end. It's just not likely to end in the near future. While today's problems seem insurmountable, we must never forget that our ancestors solved far bigger problems with far fewer resources. And this really gets to the heart of the progress-based perspective. Our ancestors had it really tough. They were living in day-to-day conditions that, quite frankly, today, we just can't imagine what they went through. They had problems that we can't even imagine today. They did not have the technology that we have today. They did not have the scientific understanding. They did not have all the engineers and entrepreneurs that we have today that are constantly solving problems. So when you start thinking about how they actually live, you start to see that, well, Things are actually pretty good today when you look at it in a real comparison, not about how you believe things should be or about some nostalgia that you think things were in the past, but as people actually lived. I believe that to solve our current problems, we must combine an awareness of progress, a feeling of gratitude towards our ancestors. They lived in such terrible conditions, but they kept going on. They kept gradually improving things for themselves and their family, and we are the beneficiaries of that. We need to, instead of looking back at our ancestors and criticizing them because they didn't do what we think they should have done, we need to feel gratitude for leaving us with a much better world. And we also need to have a willingness to learn how our ancestors achieved that progress. I believe that the very same things that created progress in the past are the same things that are going to keep it going today and make the future much better. We also need the confidence to believe that our problems are not insurmountable. The problems of the past were much worse. We can do this. We can solve these problems and make the world a better place for the next generation and the generations after that. I believe that we need to study history to understand the necessary preconditions for progress and how progress works. And that's really what my first book, From Poverty to Progress, Understanding Humanity's Greatest Achievements, is really about. In this book, I focus on two key concepts, which I believe are critical to understanding progress. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on each of these. I'm going to make videos on these in the future. But for now, it's important to understand the 5 keys to progress, which I believe are the necessary preconditions of progress and how progress works, which are the mechanics of how the society delivers progress once those 5 keys to progress evolve. Essentially, what I'm arguing is that when a society acquires a sufficient amount of each of these keys, the society transformed into a vast, decentralized problem-solving network that generates progress. Now, this is in real contradiction to how our ancestors lived. The bulk of human history has been a desperate struggle for survival. Our material prosperity was limited by fundamental geographical constraints, particularly on food. And this is exactly the way it is for all other species. They are in a constant struggle for survival, and food and being attacked by other organisms is a constant threat. Fortunately, our ancestors evolved different technologies and organization so that they could get enough food to survive in very hostile environments. But that still put serious constraints and effectively made it impossible for them to have any kind of progress because of the geography that they lived in. Fortunately, there were a very few number of societies that had unique geographies, and they were able to overcome these constraints, and they also had unique political structures. I believe that progress started not with the internet, not with mobile devices, not even with the Industrial Revolution. I believe progress started in the medieval city-states of northern Italy sometime after the year 1200. Some examples of these city-states are Venice, Milan, Genoa, Florence, Siena. Each one of them evolved what I call commercial societies that were tiny cities that were in many cases very similar to how we live today. Not with the same level of technology, but the way the societies function were remarkably similar to what I call these commercial societies. And the reason why they were able to live like that is because these societies invented 4 of the 5 keys to progress. Fortunately, that progress spread to other areas. First of all, Flanders, which is today modern-day Belgium. The Flemish copied the innovations of northern Italy in the 15th and 16th century and established their own city-states that were commercial societies. Some examples were Bruges, Antwerp, and Ghent. And by the way, each one of these cities are wonderful places to visit for tourists because many of the buildings and the architecture from their glory period are still around for us to enjoy today. So after Flanders, then that progress spread to the Netherlands. The Dutch Republic copied the innovations of the Flemish and the Italians in the 16th and 17th century, and Amsterdam became a center of world trade, every bit as important today as New York, London, and Silicon Valley. It was really a hub of innovation and trade. Then Southeast England, particularly London, copied the innovations of Flanders and Netherlands in the 17th and 18th century. And this society built the foundations for the Industrial Revolution, where progress was supercharged. Progress increased, so it was not just about a few isolated city-states, but it began to encompass entire nations and entire continents. And then the progress spread to colonial North America, which later became the United States. The United States enjoyed progress by copying the innovations of Britain, and for the last 150 years, the United States has been a driving force in progress. Fortunately, over the last few decades, that progress has spread across much of the world. And we'll go into a lot more detail as to how and why this happened in later episodes. So there's a real disconnect here. Why is it that so many people in wealthy countries have this angst and fear of the future and oftentimes very real unhappiness? Why is it that we're living in this world of progress, but yet our perceptions are radically different than how we're actually living compared to the past? Some people say, well, it's because of progress. Well, I don't believe that. I believe that the human brain did not evolve to be happy and successful in a world of progress. There is the reality of progress and then our perceptions of the world around us. Our perceptions are driven primarily by our psychology, and our brain was not hardwired to make us happy and successful in a world of progress and prosperity. The human brain evolved in a very hostile environment, first in the African savanna and then to other areas where human beings migrated, where our primary focus was on survival and reproduction. And these were areas where there was constant threats, potentially warring tribes who were going to kill us, people within our tribes who were going to murder us, predators who would suddenly kill us, or diseases that would either kill us or debilitate us for the rest of our lives. This made us all very sensitive to threats. Quite frankly, if someone says, I'm just going to enjoy my day and not worry and just appreciate life, well, that kind of person would not have survived. Our ancestors evolved to be paranoid and fearful and constantly focus on threats. Unfortunately, we still have that brain. So that means that even at a time period when those threats don't really exist, or at least they're much less than they used to be, we are still hardwired to be triggered instantly away from contentness and happiness towards threat. We've got to act now. And unfortunately, many institutions deliberately spike this threat perception. It is most common in politics, ideology, the media, and social media. They have evolved a narrative that essentially consists of things are bad, they're getting worse, and those other people are to blame. Now, this is exactly the opposite of the progress-based perspective. It is completely contrary to the world we live in, but it works because of our psychology. They trigger our threat instincts to get our attention. I believe that the study of progress in history is a therapy to help us overcome what psychologists call cognitive biases towards negative thought. That once we start to realize the way things are today compared to how they were in the past, we start to realize that our problems aren't so bad, and we can maintain a confidence that we can overcome them. But unfortunately, these political and media institutions have effectively evolved a business model that triggers our worst psychological instincts for their own benefit. Politicians get votes, activists get media coverage, the media gets viewership, interest groups gets fundraising, and social media gets likes and engagement. Now, they're not doing it to make us feel bad. They're doing it so their institutions can survive, usually by acquiring more money. And many of these people believe that they're actually helping to create a better world by constantly focusing on problems so that we can solve them. But unfortunately, that's not what the actual outcome of this. What it's actually breeding is worry, anger, resentment, and resignation. Unfortunately, these people don't understand how progress works. They believe that progress comes from government, politics, or ideology, but that's not true. That's not where progress comes. Progress comes from society. It comes from all of us. It comes from everyday people going to work and being a good parent. They might go to work in factories. They might go to work at construction sites or office buildings, but people cooperating together to solve problems at scale. And other people can then choose which one of those solutions they want to buy or copy because they believe it'll help make their life better. That's how real progress works. And unfortunately, the idea that progress comes from government, politics, and ideology has created a lot of really bad government policies which are systematically undermining progress. So, what are we to do about all this? I believe that we need to build a progress movement. First, to promote an awareness and understanding of progress, to make us realize that things aren't as bad as they seem, and that a lot of our negative perceptions are driven by business models in politics, ideology, the media, and social media. Second of all, I believe that we need to research history to identify policies and practices that promote progress. And that's really the core of what my first two books, and the third that's coming out in the future, are about. And third, we need to build a political movement to sweep away government policies that undermine progress. So let me talk a little bit more in detail about what I mean by the third point. I believe that we need a progress movement that is focused on 5 key principles. 1, we need to promote long-term, widely shared economic growth. With a growing economy, that gives us far more resources to solve problems. Without a growing economy, we're in a zero-sum society where everyone's fighting for their share, and it leads to problems for everybody. 2, we need to create a prosperous working class. We need to ensure that progress is widely shared, and we need government policies to ensure that. We also need to promote a clear pathway that enables youth from low-income families to enter the prosperous working class that we created in step number 2. And this is really important. We need to focus on results. Most ideologies focus on good intentions and what people believe. We need to focus on what actually works because results are what affect people. Good intentions don't affect people. Results do. And finally, we need to reform the political process to make all of the above possible. I believe that in American society, our political system is polarized between an increasingly liberal Democratic Party and an increasingly conservative Republican Party. And a progress-based perspective is not going to find a home in either one of those parties. We need to open up the political process to enable people who believe in progress and other people who are not represented by the main two parties to get representation. So I go into much more detail in the book Promoting Progress, which is coming out in late 2023 about each one of these, and in Upward Mobility, which is coming out in 2024. So if you lasted this far, chances are you're a little interested. Where should you go if you want to know more? Well, first of all, I would suggest going to my website, frompovertytoprogress.com. With a free email subscription, you get free ebook samples, free audio samples, and the rights to buy discounted ebooks and audiobooks. If you insist on paying full price, my books are available on Amazon, and if you're a bookstore or a library, you can go to Ingram Spark. You can find ebooks, paperbacks, and hardcovers. If you prefer audiobooks, you can go to Amazon, Audible, and iTunes. Another resource which I would recommend is an online library of book summaries called The Ratchet of Technology. That's a site I run, and it consists of about 280 book summaries on technology, history, economic growth, and progress. And essentially, there are summaries that are about the books that I read to do the research for my book series. And I was left with about 1,000 pages of book notes, and I thought, well, other people might be interested in reading these because it's a great way to learn about progress very quickly. So I decided to post them on the internet, and you can see one example here, which is 10 Global Trends Every Smart Person Should Know by Ronald Bailey and Marianne Tupy. And I think this is probably the best book to start out with if you're interested in the concept of progress. Each one of these books I rate, and then I give my comments on what I think are the main takeaways from the book. And the bulk of it consists of direct quotes from the book, so you get an idea whether the writing style and the topic is something that you'd be interested in. If you're interested in the book summaries, please support the author by buying the books. Okay, so you made it to the end. Well, maybe you're interested. So now we have the good part. Now we have the free giveaway, which is a digital copy of my first book, From Poverty to Progress. Here are the contest rules. First of all, you need to subscribe to my channel. Second of all, you need to leave a constructive comment. It doesn't have to be positive. It might be negative, but just something that helps me understand what you like, what you dislike, and how I can improve it, and maybe what topics I should cover in the future. Exactly 1 week after this video is published, I will randomly choose one commenter. I will then post the username of the winner on the community page and ask the person to email me. You must email me within 1 week to be eligible. After I authenticate you, I will then email you a link of the free download for my book. So I'm really excited about this series. Again, this is the very first episode, and there's going to be a lot to cover about all these topics. So I hope you subscribe and like, and I will see you next time.